but it's all hayfield. It's a little creek, you know.
As in our last class, we got an outstanding steer to start this class. Really good through his center body. He's a steer that's fresh enough up through his front 1/3. I love him through the center part of his body. Is he a steer that's incredibly dominant in his pin set? He isn't. I'd like to set him up in his pin set just ever so slightly, but I like the way he carries product all the way down into his stifle. He's a steer that reaches good off those back two. Just a really, really good feeding kind of a steer. Could I change him in his pin set ever so slightly? That would probably be where I'd want to change his calf, but man, he brings a lot of good stuff to the table. The calf that comes second in this calf, I just don't think there's as much true shape in his lower 1/3. He doesn't handle those back two with the authority of the steer that goes first in this class. He's a steer that gets up on those back ankles when he goes, and I'd like to change that about him. I think there's actually more shape and design through the center part of the quarter of the steer that wins this class, but I think they're a really, really nice pair of steers. Want to change the movement off those back two. The steer that comes in third, the real hairy steer here, I think he needs to balance up a little better. He sits a little slower, lower in his chest floor. He gets a little rounder in his shoulder. He just probably runs out of balance a little more than what I think's optimum. Like to pull him down in that flank. And then he shares a commonality with the steer that goes second in this class. I would like to see him be a little more comfortable at the ground. You could argue this steer brings just a tick more bone to the table than the steer that goes second. We wouldn't have that argument. We can have that discussion, and I wouldn't even disagree with you. I think there's just a skosh more bone in the steer. Both those cattle, I'd like to see them be a little more relaxed. If I'm going to put this steer in the two-hole, I want to balance him up. I want to redistribute the wealth, if you will, and take a little of that chest and that shoulder and run it to his back end, dropping in his flank there. Just a really nice trio of steers. Those are the types and kinds of differences I see in them.
Look a cigarette at the wrong time, and it'll be on you, man. Well, the tribe came out, and when they came out, they brought this little machine that ground it up.
Final call for Trent Wise. Final call for Trent Wise. Placings in Class 3 of the Angus Steer Show. Third place went to Abby Veers. Second went to Neely Davis. And first went to Colton Ward.
And that was like probably 7-8 years ago. And them cedars are twice as bad as they are. Because they've done it on a time for
seeding.
Yeah, the reseeding, and for like by the almanac to promote growth. And then you have this circle of cedar trash, and nothing's going to grow there. No grass grows there, and they got to let it cure before they come in and burn it. So basically, you got this area just you did nothing but a lost grass out of that deal. And they didn't go into any of the thick timber and anything. They just did the stuff out in the open. Some of that stuff feels like it's an uphill battle, you know.
Anytime the government's in charge, you're in trouble.
You guys have any school land down there?
Have any what?
School land?
We have some, but we don't have any. No, there is some. We've turned back some of our leases. Grant just wanted to quit, you know. As a Grant, we can't quit.
You drive each other crazy?
I would go crazy. He bought a motorcycle.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he went to Virginia here 3 or 4 weeks ago.
On his motorcycle?
By himself. Rode 500-600 miles a day.
Hey, that's hard.
I couldn't do it.
Hell no, my hips would die.
It's all what's up here, you know. No way, Jose. Now he wanted to sell all the cows, sell everything. Grant, I'll take care of the cows. We'll just put the hay up in the summer. I can take care of them. Help me work them when I wean them. So I basically take care of the cattle. I wanted to work cattle tomorrow, but he's going to go ride his motorcycle. I said, well, we're going to wean that last group Monday, so you just put that on your... Oh, sure. I don't have all my cows weaned yet.
We don't either.
Pasture. So I'm down to 1.
We got 3 places left.
Well, I've got 4 places weaned and one to go. And then I got my calves there at the house. We just wean them whenever SL says it's time to wean. And they're right there, you know, you don't have to go.
No stress involved.
Go gather them up. Of course, they don't know how to load on a trailer, you know. They have to learn. No, he put me up about 1,000 bales of hay, so I'm good for the winter.
Do what?
He put me up about 1,000 bales of hay this spring, so I'm good for the winter.
I bought one of those bale wrappers a few years back. Put that wheat rye up.
Like the marshmallow bales?
Yeah, love
So,
it.
how did you like all that waste, though?
What waste?
All that crap stuff. What do you do
What
with
crap?
it?
Oh, that plastic?
Yes.
Go in a dumpster?
Don't you just fill your dumpster up with it?
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah.
But see, we got a dumpster at my house, and then the community also has another dumpster that's over
You
by
fill it up
over
too?
by some of our passions. We fill in some of it too.
You do.
I told my dad, I said, we might want to have the community put another dumpster out.
But that is a great way to be. I think it is a great. Because so many times we get our wheat hay rained on because
yeah.
it's just that close to baling,
Yeah.
but it's not ready. And then it sits in and rains for 2 weeks.
That's the best part about it. What it used to take us, 4 or 5 weeks of being beaten your head against the wall, trying to get it
Trying
to
to get
dry
dried
here.
out.
Ready to get it tedded for a long while. You got some freaking this stalk out there because you done shook everything good off of it.
That's much
Now we
mold on it.
cut it in the evening, and the next day by noon or 2 o'clock we're
Bale
wrapping
it the
it.
next day.
Yeah, and then as soon as you get it baled, you got to get that thing where you're going to stack it and get in that machine. Because just like any wet bale, it sags down.
Yeah, it'll settle.
So we'll make them about 48 inches, maybe 50 inches tall at the max. But you go any bigger than that, I mean, that thing's going to weigh 1,600, 1,800
I can
pounds at
imagine.
48 inches.
Yeah.
They're heavy.
So how do you keep them from settling though? You just get them smashed together?
No, you just
before they
get
settle?
it. You get it there quick. You don't let it set in the field very long.
Right.
You have the crew ready to go, and you wrap it. You put it.
Got a nice class of Angus steers, a little type and kind variance, if you will. The calf that wins the class. I like this calf a great deal. He's too full. I don't know. He's got quite a bit of middle to him. And I can still accept the way he goes around the ring. I'd like to see this calf not quite as full as he is, because typically when you get him that full, they can't walk around the ring, and he can still do so. He's got too much fill in the center part of his body. He extends right now. He extends nice out in his front 1/3. He comes out high out of the point of his shoulder. He's a calf that's good enough in his shape from hooks to pins, although he looks just a tick round there, and I think it's due to the fact that be like if you eat too much supper and you just feel bloated, and I think he is definitely close to that. I'd like to change that about him. But with that being said, he's unique in that he can still go around the ring. Great hip shape. He's a steer that's really nice in his overall design. And like I said, you get one that full and then they can still go that good at the ground. That's not typical. This is a really nice steer to go second in this class. He runs downhill just ever so slightly. I think he runs just a tick out of balance when I compare him to the steer that wins this class in terms of his shoulder and his freshness from the top of his neck down into his jawline. Now that's a really, really good calf. He's true through his center body. He's good enough from hooks to pins. I think he's sound enough at the ground. The young lady that comes out right now, if you're just looking for a backdrop steer and nothing more, this calf is phenotypically really easy on the eyes. I love his extension, his freshness at this stage of the game for this calf. Young lady does a great job showing him. As I evaluate him up against other cattle I've seen today, I just wish there was more true lower 1/3 shape in this calf. Yeah, he's good coming out of the back of his shoulder. He's ample, we'll call him. He's not tremendously stout-hipped. I'm going to call it good enough. But as I view this calf compared to 1 and 2 in this class and several we've seen today, along with all that phenotypically awesome look, I just like to give him more true shape and design down toward his hock and down into his lower 1/3. Beautifully profiled calf. Young lady does a great job showing him. Then we come up to a big-ended steer that runs a little bit out of balance for me. This steer also runs a little downhill. He gets a little bolder and rounder in his shoulder than the cattle that go out above him. I'd like to change that about him. Maybe you want to pull him down in his flank. You can't deny this steer's got a tremendous amount of muscle mass and dimension to him. I just like to balance him up a little better if I could to get him any higher. And then this steer that comes next, another high-quality steer, flattens out in his rib, doesn't have that true boldness and shape and design coming out of the top of his skeletal, in my opinion. He gets a little narrower in his pin set. There just isn't as much true product from hooks to pins. He wants to duck his pins when he goes a little bit. If I'm going to get him higher, I just got to give him more true shape and design from his hooks back.
Here in our next class, the key heifers, 2 females that are high quality in their own right, and I'm going to go with the better balanced, better structured alternative here that the young lady has. I really like how that female balances, and both of them are acting a little ornery out here, but when pulled to lead, she's the one that moves the best out of her shoulder. She's the squarest from hock to ground and fills her track more appropriately. I sure like the front 1/3 of this female here in second. That gal does shoot her neck high out of the point of her shoulder. She's strong down her top and out of her hip. Today, I'd sure like to see her just move better out of her hind leg, hit square from hock to ground, be more flexible in her lower joints. Two nice females. Let's give them a hand.
In class number 2 of the Key Division, Trent Wise, second place. First place goes to Henry Chamberlain. As we move over to the steer side in the Angus class number 4, fifth place went to Cash Bixby. Fourth place went to Libby McIndoe. Third place, Chloe Corbin. Second place, Pacey McIntyre. And first place, Hadley Hunt. We'll bring back all of our heat winners to crown our champion of the Angus breed.
A single entry, brockle face, white chested female that's sure impressive from a muscularity and stoutness standpoint. You stand behind that female and she's big top, she's wide out of her pins, she's super powerful from behind and from the ground up. I guess today, to be just a shot picky on her, I'd like to lengthen her out through her front end. I'd like to make her more relaxed in her shoulder and knee. Really nice entry for that young lady.
And congratulations, Jocelyn Richard, Class 3 winner. We're going to move to Class 4 for the Keys on the heifer side, where we were still looking to crown our champion, Angus Steer, in the steer ring.
In our finale, in our Angus steer drive here, quickly the steer that wins the first class, the single entry, like I talked, so bold and good through the center of his body. He's a steer that I think as we go forward, if we can keep that front end in check, that's just a really, really nice calf. His angles are good, his structure's good. The steer that comes out of the second class, as I talked, tremendously bold out in his hip. He's as bold as anything out here, no matter what their weight range is. Nice and extended up through his front, certainly good enough through the center part of his body. You could probably pull him down in his flank just ever so slightly. What I like about this steer with the muscle mass and the quality that he possesses, he's still real sound at the ground, certainly can go. You know, we got a lightweight steer there that's got a lot of future ahead of him. The steer that comes out of the next class, from his loin forward, I love this steer. He's my favorite steer out here from his loin forward. There's not a lot to be desired. He's good coming out of his skeletal, out of his top 1/3. His boldness and shape is really good. He lays in his shoulder good. He goes pretty much north and south off those front two. What probably takes away from this steer when you evaluate him then from his loin back, he gets a little funky around his tail head. I wish there was more true product there. I wish he gets a little narrow in his tail head, around his tail head, excuse me. So I just wish there was a little more true shape and design there from his loin forward. I love this calf. The steer that comes out of the last class, as I talked him, he's full, and I think he's getting fuller. He's getting more uncomfortable. He's getting up in his top a little bit. I wish I could see this steer in a little more of a normal condition. I think he's got a lot of top. I think he's got a lot of loin. He looks to be off in his hip, and I think that he's uncomfortable, makes him look a little more that way. And being that full in the center part of his body, he looks a little high up in his flanks, so don't you think? So at any rate, that's what I see in that steer. I wish he could have come to us in a little different condition as far as I could read him out in his hip just ever so slightly. I think in my opinion, this comes down to two steers. With that being said about that steer, to me it comes down to the steer out of the second class and the steer out of the third class. If you'd indulge me, I want to look at those one more time, and then we'll pick you a champion.
Really nice class here in the key show, and I think two exceptionally high quality females lead off, and I'm really confident in the one that wins this class, and I think she does so relatively simply in my mind. Not only does she tie her neck better into her shoulder, she's still better into her forerib. She's smoother and hooks up stronger in her loin, back into her tailhead. You really like her flexibility at the ground. Would you like to clean her navel up just a little bit, but that's being nitpicky. Really like the fresh, genuine look this slicker-haired female gives you. She's one that, too, is flat into her shoulder. She's good right behind it. I'd just like to see her open up better into her heart. I'd like to see her lay neater into her tailhead, hip, and hind leg. And then the smoky female is one that's moderate. She's stout, big-footed, and heavy bone. From a balance standpoint and comparatively, she's open more into her shoulder. She's shorter and thicker over the top of her neck. Three nice females. Let's give them a hand.
Reserve breed champion of the Angus Steer Show is going to Colton Ward. And your breed champion in the Angus Steer class is going to be Carter Weber. On the key side in the heifer ring, third place went to Riley Sims, second goes to Clancy Cunningham, and first place goes to Abby Emberson.
Two females here that are different in their type and kind in my mind, and the Blaze Face that wins does so from a balance standpoint. She's the better bodied option, who's better down her top, square out of her hip. She still has more muscle shape when you stand right in behind her. From the side, she's tighter into her shoulder. She's more proportional from forward to flank. This Brockle female is just green in her build. You do like how flat she is in her shoulder. She's square out of her pins. Today, though, she runs a little shallow from heart to flank. In my mind, we'd like to see her just move better from hock to ground. Two nice females.
So I would expect, and I sure hope this calf right here is indicative of what's coming in this Charolais division. That's a good calf right there. Got a lot of good parts and pieces, that calf. His extension, a young man said he weighs 750, he's just a baby. Good through his center body, fresh up through his front 1/3. His angles are good. Is he the biggest ended steer we're probably going to see all day? I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see. He's certainly got some shape and design for a 750 pounder. I love his center body, really good. Love the way his shoulder lays in him. That's a really nice calf. I love when you put him in motion. It's fun watching him go.
On the Keys side in the heifer ring, second place went to Hudson Scribner. First place went to Terry Wamado. On the Charolais in the steer ring, Trevor Williams, Riverton, Wyoming, wins as the single in class. We'll move to class 2 in the Charolais, class 6 in the Keys.
Young lady brings a really high quality single entry female here, one that's really impressive from a body type and volume standpoint from the ground up. She's big footed and heavy boned, and she's moderate in her type and kind. Maybe one that's probably getting a little open into her shoulder, and I'd sure like to see her just move more flexible from hock to ground.
Abigail Jones takes class 6 in the Keys. We'll move to class 7 as we look at class number 2 in the Charolais and the steer ring.
As we move into class 2, as I'd hoped and expected, we certainly got some quality in this Charolais division. The white steer that wins this class, so dominating in the center part of his body. A lot of product at his top, really good from hooks to pins. Now, could I lengthen his hip a little? I probably could. He shortens up in his hip just a little bit, sits in his chest floor nice, extends out through his front nice, beautiful through the center part of his body, big-ended kind of calf. Where he excels the steer that comes in second is simply because of his overall body shape and design. And then when we put him in motion, he just simply, I think there's a little better angle. While I don't profess that it's perfect on that white one, he gets just a little straight-fronted and wants to turn out ever so slightly on that right front. The mouse-colored steer coming in second, to me, I think his angle and his front shoulder is a little more suspect. I don't think he carries into his flank quite as well. And then when I put him in motion, I think the straightness on both ends catches up with him a little. I'd like to see him a little more flex to his hock and a little more ability to go when he gets in motion.
Class number 2, the Charolais, Tyler York is going to be second place. Rachel Watley is going to be first place in the second class of Charolais.
Early really intriguing class over here as we get into older heifers and the key show. And the one that leads off for me today, I think, does so from a power and mass standpoint. You study every angle of that female, and she's wider into her forerib, she's softer through her rib and flank, she's stouter in terms of her pin width, foot and bone, and still has a balanced look. Really like the silhouette on this star-headed female here. She's one that is better into the base of her shoulder. She ties her neck higher and to a point of her shoulder, and she's longer over the top of it. From there, though, I just want to see more substance as you study her on back. She's narrower down her top and into her pin. She's flatter through her stifle, frailer in her bone work. And then the female that rounds out the class, in all honesty, is just greener in her build, and I encourage that young lady to just keep feeding on her. She just needs to open up, just get stouter all the way through. Let's give them a nice hand.
Class 7 of keys in the heifer ring. Third place goes to Brianna Keelan. Second place goes to Owen Adams. And first place goes to Raymond Danielson.
So this will get your blood pumping just a little faster when you get 4 come in the ring that are this nice. And with that being said, we got a pair of steers on the top of this class that I think are exceptionally good. They're not identical in type and kind. I think they're really, really good in their type and kind. The steer that wins the class, he fits many, many things for me. I love his front end. I love his freshness going forward for his future in this calf. Love him coming out of the back side of his shoulder. A lot of product going out into his loin, real square from hooks to pins. And then I said, as you couple that with the fact that he's real clean in his sheath, he's real good in his chest floor. I love the head on this steer. And then when you put him in motion, I hadn't even mentioned that yet. That's probably the part that impresses me the most. To have that much look, that much power, and still be able to do it the way he does it. Big footed, great angles off of both ends. Really nice calf. Love the way that God put that tail head joined into his spine. Just really nice. If you want a burly one, this rascal that stands second, that's a really nice calf. He probably doesn't join into his flank quite as optimum as the steer that beats him, but that's really good cattle. Big bone, big, bold. He probably doesn't lay in his shoulder quite as nice as the steer that beats him. Love that steer when he goes away. He just screams at you with hip. Just a really, really nice calf, really good bone. The steer that stands third simply goes third because where he excels the fourth place steer, in my opinion, is he's better and bolder through his spring of his center body. He comes out of the top of his spine better. He carries down deeper. He's a steer that gets a little deep from the top of his crest down into his jawline, but certainly not bad. I think he's certainly sound enough. Just a really, really good calf. Got beat by 2 really good calves in this class. And again, as I'll reiterate, where he excels the fourth place steer is center body, the way he's designed coming out of his spine, the curvature to his rib, the depth to his rib. He's a little squarer hip. The calf, the kind of brindley colored calf that comes next, high quality calf to be sure. He stands a little wide on those front end, on those front two. He gets a little flatter in his overall rib shape and design. I'd like to make him a little bolder in his rib shape and design. I think he's deep enough bodied. I'd just like to see a little more boldness, a little more curvature to that rib, and then I'd like to make a little more true explosion out in his hip. Nice foursome of Charolais steers.
As we move into our oldest class of keys, two nice females that I think both need to be redesigned in different aspects. And the female that leads, I think if you really clean up her chest and make her more coordinated off her hind leg, she's still the most genuine in terms of her muscularity. She's the boldest bodied and the deepest to her rib and flank. I think she still hinges the best out of her shoulder. She's the most comfortable at her knee. I really like this female on second from the ground up in terms of how heavy structured she is. She's wide-based. To me, she's just a little greener in her build, particularly when you study her down her top, over her rib and loin, and back through her flank.
Placings in the Charolais Steer Class 3. Justin Rosser, fourth place. Third place went to Cassie Kelly. Second place went to Kylie Callis. And first place went to Mason Allett. In the Keys Class number 8, second place went to Tyler Welty. And first place went to Taylor Millick.
Let's give each one of these class winners a big hand out here in the key drive. I think there's exceptional quality all the way through. I know it's taken a little longer to get to this point, but I think that each one of them are really good. And kind of what I said all day is, you start at the ground in terms of a functionally correct structural base. Still got to be good bodied, and they got to be muscular. And I think there's a couple out here that for sure do this. In my mind, it's probably more of a two-horse race when you really get to looking at them. So let's give them another big hand, and I'll go show you the ones that I like the best.
So we got an outstanding class again of Charolais steers. The pair of steers that come to the top of this class are a lot alike in similarities, not only their color, but I think in type and kind. With that being said, I've opted to go with the steer. I think his true mobility is better off of both ends. Steer that's really square at his hip. Both these cattle share a commonality, in my opinion. I'd like to make them a little truer and a little more product into their forerib coming out of the back of their shoulder. With that being said, the steer that starts this class, I think he comes up nice out of the top of his shoulder. He's a steer that's pretty good in his shoulder. He's got a little excess at the point of his shoulder. And like I said, if I could join him in with a little more true shape and forerib coming out of the back of his shoulder, I'd probably take that opportunity, as I would with the second place steer. I think this steer has a little more true rib shape and design in terms of his boldness of rib than the steer that comes in second in this class, and I think he's a longer, softer strided cattle than the calf that goes in second. That being said, this calf that goes in second, as I said, they share a commonality behind their shoulder. I'd like both of them to be a little better there. I think the angles on both ends of my first place steer, in his front knee and in his back knee, his hock, if you will, I think he gets a little more restricted and a little straighter there. As a result, I think he gets a little shorter and a little straighter pastured. I don't think the movement is quite as good. Maybe it's because he's a little narrower footed, wants to roll off that outside wall on that back foot. I think that front knee sits just a little closer and wants to toe out just a little more than the steer that goes first in this class. This orange steer here, this is a steer to be admired for sure. He's a steer, and if I could advise you, I wouldn't tap him on the nose anymore, okay? When you tap him on the nose, I already question his mobility when he goes, and when you tap him on the nose, he camps his top up and snaps his ankles over. So I would just hold your show stick up in front of him. I would advise that maybe you don't tap him on the nose, because it takes away from you. That's a good calf. He doesn't have as much flank as the two that beat him in the class. He's a steer, I think, with proper hoof trimming. He wants to roll outside on that back wall just a little and wants to get up over on his ankles, but you accentuate that when you tap him on the nose, okay? So I think you'd be better off now. That's a high quality calf to be sure. A little rounder muscle cattle. I love his muscle. I mean, I love the fact that he's got muscle. He gets a little short throughout for me. I'd like to stretch his neck out. I'd like to stretch his hip out. Now, you can't deny as much shape and design in that hip as any steer in here. He just gets a little round, a little more basketball shaped, if you will, in his hip design and his rump design and his roundness of shoulder. I'd like to change that. And then I'd like to lengthen his skeleton out ever so much, ever so slightly. The white steer that comes next, a steer that just looks to me like he's got a little more white meat than true muscle shape. He's got some extra rind on him. He's getting a little bit staler up in his front 1/3, and then when I put him in motion, I want him to do so with more authority. The steer that comes out now, the mouse-colored steer, tremendous through the middle part of his body. With that being said, that body doesn't join into the backside of his shoulder like I'd like to see. He gets a little weaker behind his shoulder. He gets a little weaker in his loin, and then he gets a little more camped up in his tailhead. So I just want to balance balance him up throughout. I want to pick him up in his chest floor. I just want to give him a little more true balance. As far as rib shape and design, he's as good as any steer in his class. He truly is, through the very center of his body. And then this orange steer comes in. You're in a tough class, sister. This is a really nice steer. Overall, his body length is something to be admired. As I view him to these cattle that beat you, we just got to give you a little more softness of body. We got to set that tail head down in his back just ever so slightly. Maybe give him just a little more performance down in that flank.
In class number 4 of the Charlotte Steer Show, we've got 5th place went to Tyler Harper, 4th place went to Lance McIntyre, 3rd place went to Paisley Sturgeon, 2nd place Madison Shout, and 1st place Brooklyn Buckingham. On the Keys Heifer Show, your reserve breed champion goes to Kennedy Lockhart, and your breed champion of the Keys is going to Abby Emberson.
A really nice way to start the Horned Hereford Show, and 2 calves here as we start off that are ultra different in their type and kind, and I'm going to go with the leaner made, slender female that's better in her shoulder. She's cleaner through her throat, neck, and chest, and she's still good in her top line. She's one that wants to pick her tail head up ever so slightly, and to me she's just green enough in her build. Really like the power and the body and the bone in this female that's going to be second. She's wanting to act like a knothead out here, and that's why we bring them to shows and get them out, but she's one that I'd still like to clean up through her front 1/3. She needs to be stronger behind her shoulder and better set into her tail head. Really nice pair of females. Let's give them a hand.
So as we evaluate this trio of Charolais steers, the steer that wins this class, young lady says he weighs 1140. Just a very, very nice design steer. Bold and prominent in his hip, really big in his loin, good in the backside of his shoulder. And as we approach a closer weight to marketability, although we're quite a ways off yet, still has a really fresh crest to his neck. He's good down into his jawline. Just a really nice steer, nice bone cattle. You stand behind him, his hocks is pretty well true. The steer that comes in second is a steer I don't think his angles are quite as good off his front end, which causes him to get a little wider on his front. I think if his angle was a little different, I'd like to see him set up a little different off that front end. Has a little more boldness of shoulder that takes him out of balance just ever so slightly, but with that being said, I still think he's the steer that's got to go second in this class. He's nice through his center body. You probably need to hold his head a little higher and show off that front end. He's pretty nice fronted cattle. He's a calf. As he starts to get a little bolder in his crest, I think you can take a little of that away by keeping his head, being a little more aggressive on his head. As I compare him to the steer that goes first in his class, as you watch him go, and from the side, he gets a little out on those hocks. He's a little not quite as comfortable on his hock. The steer that comes third in this class is a really nice steer. He's really good at the ground. He's got a little more chest floor than the steer that goes out in front of him. Just a really nice calf. Looks a little staler in his kind, and I don't mean he's stale as far as his condition. He's just a steer that his hair's in that stage of the game, which has no bearing on how good a quality is. That's a really good calf too. Probably runs downhill just ever so slightly, but a really good trio of steers.
Class number 5 of the Charlotte Steer Show. Third place went to Ivy Cohen, second place Michaela Hunt, and first place Tinley Mefford.
We got a single entry here in our Charlet drive and got a really nice mouse-colored steer. Love his overall body length. He's long of skeletal steer that'll weigh up really nice. I think he's adequate through the center part of his body. Truthfully, that color pattern on him throws away from him. When you first look at him, you think he looks just a tick stale, and with that dapple in his color, you really got to evaluate and read this steer. Again, like I said, he's good in his barrel. He's good enough up through his front end. I'd call him adequate in his hip shape. He's just a really nice, sound, functional calf with a big, good, functional foot underneath of him.
Well, as we think through a horned Hereford Heifer drive, and all these were class winners, and we didn't get to give them their due diligence in talking about them. So briefly, as I go through them, we talked about the calf as she was in that contested class, about just how slender and sleek she is through her front 1/3. She's good in her body shape. She's good in her structural base. A good-bodied, big-footed, heavy-boned one there, second in the lineup. She's one that has some volume, some spring of rib, and some pin width. Probably if you compare her to females on either side of her, probably just gets a little touch deeper through her throat and her chest, and we'd like to see her stronger behind her shoulder. The next one in line, I really like that one's structure. Her flexibility at the ground and her lower joints is admirable. She's one that's really good in her body. She's awesome in her hip and hind leg. Just greener in her build if you really study her down her top, and there probably is a lot of good future in that one. Next one in the lineup is soft-haired. She's neat looking looking from the side. Maybe wants to get a little tighter in her top and frailer if you really study heifers on either side of her, but really nice from that aspect. Dark red female that's over here kind of in the corner is one I like in terms of her outline and extension. She's really good in her joints and flexibility. Maybe one we'd like to set down into her tailhead ever so slightly, but a good-bodied, moderate female that's really flexible. Another sensibly sized, bold-sprung one that's there next. I like her in terms of her body shape. Probably just one we need to redesign structurally if we study her through her front end. Much of the same can be said for the next female in line. Huge volume, big-footed, and heavy bone. Probably from a balance and design, eye appeal standpoint. She's plenty open in her shoulder and deep through her chest. We just like to lean her up. The next young man here in the cowboy hat's female, I think from the ground up, is one of the stoutest out here in the lineup. Not only from genuine base width standpoint, muscularity, you really study that one down her top and out of her pins. She's wide. She's got some muscularity from behind. I'd like to see her just a little leaner down through the base of her chest, probably a shot stronger behind her shoulder. Then the bred female is one that needs to be commended for being this heavy bred and springing, to be so fresh and genuine in her build. She's bold in her body. She's really flexible in her lower joints, and we like that about her. One that I think that's done everything right. So that's the stuff I'm seeing in them. I think we deserve to give them a big hand for bringing out here the breeders and the showmen that have done this. I'll look through them one more time, select you a champion.
In this Charlotte class on this side of the ring, the gold, I guess, is the color, the beautiful color of this steer. I guess I call it gold, but at any rate, just so many good attributes this calf brings to the table. He's getting in the northern part of 1300s, but good bone, nice footed, toes out just ever so slightly up front, but man, he's good through his center body, nice to the touch, good and square from hooks to pins, got some width and dimension through his center quarter, and still being that far along and market ready, he's a steer that's real fresh up through his front end. So if I could change this steer, and like I said earlier in the day, never seen a head of cattle I wouldn't change something about, whether it's yours or mine. He toes out just ever so slightly. That's being critical of an awfully nice steer. Nothing wrong with this steer that matches him in color that goes second in this class as far as his overall body length. What gets him in trouble is his angles concerns me a little on his front end. I noticed this steer in showmanship. You had him in showmanship, correct? Love this calf. It's really nice, extended up through his front. He causes me a little concern the way his knee sits forward and he gets a little iffy and a little tentative to his front angle. And as I view him, probably doesn't have quite the insurmountable body width and dimension through the center part of his body as the steer that beats him in this class. But you got your really nice calf there. If we can set that shoulder angle back, that'd probably be the optimum. That's a really nice calf.
And in class number 7 of the Charlotte Steer Show, second place went to Kylie Ward. First place went to Briley Fuss. On the heifer side, in the Horned Heifer division, your reserve breed champion goes to Clayton Carpenter, and your breed champion goes to Emma Lynn.
A really nice way to get started here in the Repole Hereford show, and the young man brings one that in my mind just callier in her appearance. She's the better bodied option, particularly through her lower body. She opens up better into her forerib and flank. She's a heavier bone, bigger footed, heavier muscled female. Really like this one in second up through her front 1/3. She's flat in her shoulder and probably cleaner through her throat. From there though, she wants to get narrower underneath, and we need to pry her apart in terms of rib shape. Two awfully nice females. Let's give them a hand.
So folks, I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but I would certainly think you'd have to agree this was one awesome drive of breed steers here in this Charolais division, starting with the gold steer that comes out in a single entry early in the day or early in this drive. And so much to admire about this steer. He's a calf that gives up a lot of weight to everything behind him, obviously just a baby in this drive. I think the young man, if my memory serves me, said he weighs in that 750 range. And man, he's so nice up through his front 1/3. He's so nice in his angles. He's so nice in his middle. He's a steer that I think's got adequate quarter to him. I think that calf's going to be a lot of fun going forward. Really good in his bone work, really good in his footwork. The young lady that wins the second class, he was a Boulder rib cattle in the calf he beat in this class. Really good through the center body. As you can see, what I can see from the sidelines, he's so deep in the middle part of his body, he wants to cut up in his flank, and in doing so, it appears to make him look a little shorter hipped. I don't know if he really is. I think if that flank blended into him just a little better, maybe that would make that hip look a little better. The gunsmoke colored one, I guess I'll call him, that comes out of the third class. I made no secret about it in class. I like this steer a great deal. He's big footed. He's far reaching. He's real good bone. I love his squareness of hip, and with his squareness of hip, I like the way he carries down. You can see a crease when he walks. He carries down into his stifle. You know, I've always liked to been a little bit of a sucker for square hip cattle, but oftentimes when you get them that square hip, you give up a little in their lower 1/3, and he certainly doesn't do that. He's real good in his underline. He's good in his bone work. As I said, you stand behind him, those hocks sit straight under him. He squares up nice, really nice headed steer. I love this steer that come out of the next class. I love his squareness of hip. Now, he's probably an example of what I'm talking about. I love his squareness of hip. I don't think there's maybe quite as much true shape and design in his lower 1/3, and when he goes in motion, it doesn't just reach out at you, maybe like the little steer that's right ahead of him. This steer, as I talked, he beat a steer in class that I thought his structure excelled the steer in second. Both those calves cattle I thought needed to be just a little better in their forerib joint and in the backside of their shoulder. They were both of the same color and both of the same quality. I thought structure and running gear is what put this steer in first. The predominantly white steer that wins the next class, just loaded with red meat, kind of has a hip somewhat similar to the steer out of the third class, not identical, but a lot of shape, carries that shape down lower into his design, real good through his center. He's a steer as he goes in motion. I think he's just a little narrow on that back foot, and he gets a little out and around on that wall, and I think it causes him, not always, but once in a while, to get just a little tentative on that back wheel as far as his ankles are concerned. The young lady that comes out of the second to last class, the mouse-colored steer, she come in as a single entry. As I admired her in class, I still admire her for her overall body length. The steer, his hair's in kind of an awkward stage right now. I'm not here to judge who's got the best hair. I'm just stating a fact. Makes him look just a tick staler, and that color just takes away from him just a little. So you really got to evaluate this calf. I think that's real good cattle. Probably doesn't blend into his flank as good as a couple of those on either side of him, but a really, really nice steer. And then old Goldie here, the big heavyweight steer that's really, really great in his overall design. Like I said, you're looking at what I'm looking at. Beautiful through the center body. He's a steer that's still fresh enough from the top of his crest down into his jawline. He's got just a little bit of accumulation there in his chest floor, but he's a steer that's bumping 1,400 pounds, so I don't expect him to look like this 750-pounder down here. Really good in his bone. He's a good-footed cattle. Does he toe out up front a little? Yeah, he does, just ever so slightly, and that's if you came to my house and started criticizing one of my kids for that, I'd say, you're getting too picky. That's a really, really nice calf. I don't think his front feet go straight north and south as well as I would like them. There is a steer out here I like a great deal that fits me like a glove. After that, I got it down to a couple more for my reserve hole. I'll go out and pick your champion, and then we'll get you your reserve.
Another high-quality class over here in our second class, pulled Hereford Heifers, and I think it's challenging on top, particularly because both females are really good in their own right, and as you break them down and dissect kind of where your priorities lie, I think the one that's the best balance today in terms of how sleek she is, she's good in her top line, she's really nice if you look in terms of body shape and structural integrity. She's one that I'd sure like to see more relaxed in her spine and go better out of her hip and hind leg, but I think today in terms of just femininity and balance, she wins. Really like the super power, stout cow shape of this one here in second. From the ground up, she's wide, she's big-footed, she's big-bellied female. I think she's wanting to be a little ornery today, and it just doesn't help her as much if you really want to study her in terms of structure. The next female is one that's moderate in her type and kind. She's got some body shape. She really goes probably as good as any in terms of structural. Today, she just gives up quite a bit in terms of weight per day of age. And then we round out the class with a female that has some length and some extension, just greener in her build. She needs more body shape if you study her from forward to flank.
We're looking for Laramie Taylor, class number 3 in the pulled Herefords. Laramie Taylor, we are looking for you. Charlet Reserve Breed Champion Briley Fuss. Breed Champion goes to Mason Allen. We're looking for keys on the steer side. Class number 1 of the keys making their way in the ring right now. Looking for Rylan Williams. Class number 2 of the Bold Herefords on the heifer side. 4th place went to Cassidy Pope, 3rd went to Crossland Garcia, 2nd went to Kenneth Silas, and 1st goes to Wyatt McIntyre. Last call for Laramie Taylor in the heifer ring. Last call for Laramie Taylor in the heifer ring.
Well, to kick off our key drive, looks like we did it in a really fashionable way. This steer is really super good through the center part of his body. Man, you talk about extended and freaky fronted. Now, how he'll feed going forward, time will tell. We got to get him a little better right on the back side of his shoulder, but that's where it seems to always show up on a skinny one is that you wonder if they're going to be quite stout enough and quite marvelous enough right behind their shoulder. If he does that, boy, he's got a lot of good moving parts. I think his flex is good enough, his bone is good, his feet are good. Yes, his tail head drops down in him a little bit raw. As we go forward and fill that in with some fat and some meat around it, that maybe won't look quite so pronounced. Man, he's phenotypically easy to look at. Be interesting as we go forward and get some feed behind him, how he looks.
On the steer side, class number 1 keys, Jamie Turner, Jamie Turner is your champion, or winner of class 1. If you're showing a key steer, if you're showing in the steer show with a key, you please need to report to the makeup area. If you're showing a key in the steer show, please report to the makeup area. We're moving to class number 2 with only 1 entry. 3, 4, and 5, we need you staging.
So as we hold suit in the key drive for another single entry, got a really nice calf here in his single entry. He's good enough through his center body. I think he's a steer. If I could pick him up in his pins, he wants to drop up, but he does show me some true muscle shape. I watched him as he come around the corner past the trailer headed this way, and he really is bold up in his hip. He has a lot of expression and a lot of muscle there when he goes away for a calf that's still really green, so that's very promising. Good and bold through the center part of his rib. In a perfect world, to make his hip look longer and make his underlying look better, I think if he was dropped down in his flank just ever so slightly, that would balance that calf up. So we get him a little fatter, a little hairier from the sheath back to his cod. That's a really, really nice calf. Now he's a little bit tentative at the ground, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way you've clipped the hair on him. You've left big wads of hair on the front of his ankle, and I think you could help him tremendously if you cut a little more angle to that hair and get him look like he's got a little more true God-given shape to that back leg. That's a really nice calf you got there.
Well, just two in this particular class that are different in their type and kind and at different stages of their weight per day of age and performance in my mind. And I'm going to go with the better body, better structured option. This female opens better into her heart. She's softer through her rib and flank. She's laid in neater about her shoulder. She's a female we'd like to make better into her tail head, clean her up through the base of her chest. Really like this female in second through her front 1/3. She's more feminine and fresher if you really want to get down to it. She's probably one that's tighter over the top of her shoulder. Today she wants to flatten plenty into her heart. She runs up into her flank. I just like to see more genuine width when you stand in behind her. Two awfully nice females. Let's give them a hand.
On the heifer side, the pulled Hereford. Class number 3, second place goes to Kylan Oaks. First place goes to Jalen Hammond. If you are showing a key steer, please make your way to the makeup area. We are moving through class number 3 right now.
This young lady brings us a single entry, one that I think if you really from the ground up excels from a foot size, a bone, a body shape, maybe one that in terms of her balance we'd sure like to redesign through the front 1/3 of her body, sure make her move more coordinated out of her hip and hind leg.
Looking for Logan Cook. Logan Cook to the steer ring, please.
Well, we've got an outstanding steer for sure to start this key class, this gray steer, silver steer, I guess we'll call him. Just brings so much to the table that I like. He's square hip, he's good through his center body, he extends nice. A young lady was saying he was in that 9 weight range, is that right? So a lot of future this calf. Love the running gear God gave this calf. Big-footed, great angles. And he's just a calf that shows you a lot of width and dimension as you view him and still got an overall show ring presence. Just a really, really nice calf to start this class. Well, as I choose between 2 and 3, I've opted to go with the Boulder Bodied steer. Both these steers show a commonality to me. They're a little narrow-footed and they want to roll out around on their outside wall. Wants them to get up on their ankles, and I don't think that's optimum. I actually think this steer's got a little foot rot going on, and I can actually see it, and so I think that's causing him to want to snap his ankles, but I can't make that judgment. You don't know if it's a structural thing or if it's an added-on thing. So with that being said, going back to where I was saying, he's just got more true center width and dimension, and I think more true hip shape and design than the steer that goes third in his class. Really, really good. Maybe runs just a tick out of balance at this stage of his career in terms of having to go forward and get market ready. He gets just a little staler from the top of his crest down into his dewlap, but just a really, really nice calf, again, through the center body. He's good. And then I just see more true shape and design out in his hip. The third place steer, and it is a little bit tough to read these cattle with this snub in their nose. I'm not criticizing you for having it. I'm cool with you having it, but they always want to fight that, and when they fight it, every time they drop their pins when they walk, because they're fighting it and they go up in their back and down in their pins, so it just gets a little harder to read them. My suggestion, maybe if you can, is back off that snub just a little and use your halter more, if you can. Maybe he won't let you, but center body and absolute robustness in his rib shape gives up a little to the steer that beat you, and I just don't think there's as much true shape and design out in his hip. A really nice calf.
Class number 3 of the Keys, third place goes to Bentley Lester, second place goes to Creighton Carpenter, and first place goes to London Bird.
I apologize on this class, Hereford's, for taking a little longer, just studying, lining them up kind of how I'm seeing them, and I think the one that wins from a complete, functionally correct structural base, she's the freshest, but yet the boldest bodied and the widest pinned, heaviest boned female is the one that's going to lead off. She's one that I think comparatively to the female right behind her, you probably like to lengthen her out through her front 1/3, but I think if you actually study her for genuine shape down her top and out of her hip, and follow that from forward to flank, she excels in that area. Really like this female's freshness. She's loose structured. She goes around really flexible in her lower joints. Today, I'd like to see her opened up better into her heart, stronger right behind her shoulder. She'd like to widen her out from behind. The next female is just moderate in her type and kind. She's big-bodied. She's high-volumed. I appreciate that about her. She's one that's getting there in terms of condition in my mind. We'd sure like to clean her up through the base of her chest, make her wider from stifle to stifle. Huge middle, high-volumed, heavy-muscled female here that's going to come next, and I appreciate that about her. Today, and structurally, is where she falls out in my mind. She's plenty upright in her shoulder, needs to be laid back better at her knee. I'd like to see her more flexible out of her hip and hind leg. And then the young man that's going to round out the class, I think ran into an ultra-high-quality class, a female we like from a length and extension standpoint, just needs to put it into a better balanced package. She needs to be stronger down her top and deeper body from forward to flank.
In placings in Class 5 of the Pulled Hereford Heifer Division, 5th place goes to Riley Mack. 4th place goes to Dylan Regstra. 3rd place goes to Keelan Dirksen. 2nd place goes to Emma Lynn. And 1st place goes to Creighton Carpenter.
Well, this is an outstanding class of steers to be sure, folks, and as we get down the line, we'll talk about some differences that made them shuffle down the line a little further, but these two gold-colored steers, and I know it looks like I'm preferential to this color, it just so happens that these ones that keep coming are the top-end cattle are just cattle that strike me as being top-end cattle. That being said, the young man that shows this gold steer, really good through his center body. I love this calf, the way he lays in his shoulder and his freshness in his front 1/3, He's good enough footed. He's a calf that he goes a little wider at his base than this calf that goes second. Now, having said that, over the years, we've always ended up, for my own kids, buying some cattle at track just a little narrower as they were young cattle, and it seemed like we always got them past that. Once we get to this stage, though, when we're up in this weight range, then I think they need to be, I certainly rather that than they get outside their track and get stoved up and short-strided. But with that being said, a couple differentiating factors for me. I love the hip shape and design of my second place steer. I think he carries down into his hock more true than the steer that wins a class. With that being said, I think the steer that wins a class comes out on the backside of his shoulder a little truer. I like the way the steer tracks. He's a steer that doesn't show me quite as much true shape, like I said, down into his lower 1/3. The steer that comes second in this class causes me a little bit of a concern. He's got some puffiness on the inside of those hocks, and I think it's caused from a little bit of a narrower foot and wants to get out around on that outside wall, if I'm correct in evaluating that. That's an outstanding pair of steers. I think the steer that goes second, like I said, maybe doesn't lay into that shoulder just quite as optimal as the steer that beats him. Do I think he has more true shape and design out around down into his stifle? I do. I think that steer has a little more true shape into his lower 1/3. The absolutely deceptive steer in this class is the blood red steer. I love the designation of this steer. I like the way he ties together in his front 1/3. This steer is unique in terms of he is a lot stouter than I thought he would be. Just looking at him from the side, I mean, he's got all the profile in the world. He extends ice up through his front 1/3, but then you get behind him, and he's got truly some center rigg to his pins and to the center of his quarter. Just a really, really nice calf. The next pair of steers, the really big-bodied silver-colored steer, I really like this steer, but he's just a little shorter couple from me, for what I like for my type and kind. Now, you throw him under a different judge, he can win the class, and I'm not going to argue that with anyone. He gets a little rounder in his shoulder. He gets a little shorter coupled from end to end for me. I'd like to change that about him for what I like in cattle. This gray steer here, a lot of power in this steer to be sure. Big, stout, bold hip in this calf. Quite a bit of shoulder in this calf. I'd like to make him, certainly refine him in his shoulder and make him a little better behind his shoulder, but just a high quality calf. Then the silver steer that comes out now, as I compare him to everything that went out above him, he's a steer that, he's a little shorter spine and he still wants to break behind his shoulders a little, and then quality running from hooks to pins. He just simply runs out of gas a little bit. Nice calf. Runs out of balance a little, got a little extra rind in that chest floor, and then if I want to get him higher, I certainly got to give him more hip, and he wants to camp up in his back when he goes in motion. Beautiful through the center part of his body. The black steer that goes out right now, skeletal length, nothing can compare to him or is any better than him, I guess I should say, in this class. He has all the skeletal length in the world. If I'm going to get him higher or more competitive in this class, I got to give him more barrel and more depth, just a little less daylight under that calf. He's maybe just, and I'm not trying to be derogatory, he's just a little old school built, if you will, but a really, really nice steer, tremendously long-bodied cattle.
A really nice class over here in the Hereford show, and I think two females that are different in their type and kind, and I think that it's close enough that I'm sure that they've showed against one another and it could get switched, but I'm going to go with the fresh, genuine female the young lady has. I'll be the first to admit she's carrying a little extra throat if you really study her up there, but man, what a flat-shouldered, long-necked female that's strong down her top. She's good in her body shape and flexible in her lower joints. This conservatively marked dark red one is one that I like in moderation. I like from a rib shape standpoint. She's the heavier boned female of the pair. With that, I think she gets a little open into her shoulder and deeper in her chest relative to her flank, and you really stand in and study her from behind. She tapers quite a bit back into her pins down to her stifle. Another big ribbed female that's massive when you study her down her top. I think, though, from a balance and design standpoint, she's plenty open into her shoulder. She's getting up there in terms of condition. We'd like to just see more genuine shape if you really get in behind her. Three nice females. Let's give them a hand.
So in our final key class, this single entry, a steer weighing just on the bottom side of 1,300, I think the young lady said 1,270. Phenotypically and design-wise, there's not really a lot to mess around and change about this steer as far as overall look. He's extended up through his front. He's very fresh. He's a nice-headed cattle. He's good backed. Is he the deepest bodied steer we've seen out here yet today? No, he probably doesn't fit that bill, but is he shallow bodied? No, I don't think that would be fair to say about him either. He's a real big footed cattle. I think he's a steer though when you put him in motion in a perfect world. If I could give him a little more bend to that hock and a little more true flex, I'm certainly not calling him unsound. I think that calf is really, really well designed. I think he's wide enough from hooks to pins. I think he's got enough center width through his hip. Not huge bedded, but certainly adequate in my opinion. Just a really, really nice, really complete steer.
So we get into these older females, 2 females in this class, and I think the one that leads off wins this class in my mind quite handily. That's the freshest appearing, most genuine, flexible female that's the best balanced if you really study her out of her heart and into her flank. Still's got the most pin shape and stout cow shape. Really long, extended female that comes next, probably one that falls out in my mind from a structural standpoint. She's a little upright in her shoulder. I'd sure like to clean her up at the base of her chest, make her softer through her rear rib and flank.
And we'll go back and capitalize on the keys in the steer side. In class number 4, your top 3 were Chloe McIntyre, Braden Callis, and Kyler Pettigrew. Kylie Dodd won the 5th class as a single entry. As we go back to the polled Herefords in the heifer ring, class number 6, Caitlin Scott took 3rd place. 2nd place went to Cash Long, and 1st place went to Charlie Kinder. In the polled Hereford 7th class, 2nd place went to Dyson Dunlap. 1st place went to Kenneth Sivas. We're going to crown both breed champions right now. Hereford Steers, we are about to start your division. Hereford Steers, please get to the makeup area. Limousine, we are coming to you next in the Hereford Arena, in the Hereford ring as well. Limousines to the heifer ring and Herefords to the steer ring.
So in our key wrap-up, we had 2 individuals that come out of their first classes, calves that were real green in their type and design. thought there was a whole lot of quality in those cattle going forward, just some question marks on them, how they respond to feed, filling in behind their shoulder and what have you, but really good through their center body, and I think there's a lot of future in both those calves. The predominantly white or silver steer that comes out of the next class, the third class, as I talked to him in class, really like this calf, love him through his center body. Now, he is so good through his center body and so bold in his rib shape, he is just a little high flanked as I look at him out here, and it tends to want him make him look a little short hipped when that flank cuts up in there, and he might even be just a nickel short hip, but boy, the running gear under him, his top line, good enough in his hip, good enough through his center quarter, nice bone, nice footed, just a really good calf. Then the young man comes out of a class, remember there was 2 gold steers in that class, 2 high quality steers. This steer was really, really nice. He was a little better in his shoulder. I thought he was a little better in his cleanliness of joints, but just a really nice calf. Love this calf in the top part of his crest down into his jawline. Excuse me, he's really good in his top 1/3 of his skeletal, going back into his loin, adequate out in his hip. As I talked to him in class, am I saying he's the biggest, shapeliest steer we've seen today? He's got enough. He's not just overpoweringly, but he's certainly got enough. As I talked the second place winner in that class, why I didn't think his structure was quite as good as this steer, I thought maybe he carried down with a little more true product into his lower 1/3, down into his stifle. But really eye-appealing, phenotypically backdrop-looking steer that stands in front of me now, the black steer, phenotypically really, really easy on the eyes. As I get him out here and view him, could I make him a little different in his mid-shape? I'd like to give him a little more spring of rib and a little more depth of rib, and as good-looking as he is, I'd like to give a little more true shape out in his hip. If I'm going to give that up, I certainly don't want to give up his lack of mobility in his hock, and I think he restricts himself in his hock just ever so slightly. I know it sounds like I'm really being critical of an awfully, awfully nice steer, but I think if I'm going to give up a little bit of that muscle to get that phenomenal phenotype, I certainly don't want to give up the movement in his hock and down at the ground either. So with that being said, I think it's a really, really nice lineup. I'll pick your champions here, but again, how about a round of applause for a heck of a group of key steers.
A really nice lineup of Hereford Heifers, and I think there was some challenge through the classes, but so we get the class winners back out here again as they've lined up all day. I think you like them, not only from a balance and eye perspective, but to go out and be profitable and productive, not only from a body shape standpoint, but they're functionally correct from a structural based standpoint. I think there's several different ways you could go, and the beauty of being in the cattle business and having several opinions is I guess that I get to make mine today and show you all the ones that I like. Let's give them a big hand, and I'll go show you the 2 that I like.
In the keys, in the steer show, your reserve breed champion is going to Braden Callis, and your breed champion in the keys is going to Kyler Pettigrew. We'll move on to the Herefords in the steer show as we move to crown the champions in the Polled Hereford show right now as well, and then we'll move into the limousine.
So in this deep red Hereford steer, glad to see this guy come along. My daughter shows Hereford Heifers, and we like the Hereford world, and that's a really, really good steer. I think she said he weighs 570. Just really, really good in his design. Love his shoulder, love his extension. He's fresh, he's youthful looking in his head. He's got some top and he's got some loin at this young stage of his career. Love the leg design in his calf. He's got a really long, soft pastern on both ends of his skeletal. Stand behind him. He certainly, not only does he have a phenotypical good look, he's also got some shape and dimension to him.
In the polled Hereford Heifer show, your reserve breed champion went to Kenneth Silas, and your breed champion went to Creighton Carpenter.
Really nice pair of calves as we get started in the Limb Flex show, and I think to me the one that leads off does so from a moderation, a volume and mass standpoint. She's one that moves out better if you really study her in terms of structure out of her front end. She hinges better out of her hip and hind leg. Big scaled, big outline, long-sided female in second. She's greener in her build if you truly study her. One that you'd like to see more mass over her top, probably move freer from hock to ground. Two nice females, let's give them a hand.
Landry Allen and Mason Shout.
Landry Allen, Mason Shout, please report to the steer makeup area. Landry Allen and Mason Shout to the steer makeup area. We're looking for Gabriel Lopez, Olivia Churchman, and Olivia Smith in the heifer makeup area. Once again, that is Lopez, Churchman, and Smith in the heifer warm-up area.
So in this class, Mary Lou started doing her job for me. She placed them before they even come in the ring. So we got them 1, 2, 3 the way they come in. We're going to leave them that way. The steer that wins the class, really, really well constructed. Good through his center body. And that's where he beats the steer. Both these cattle are really good. And I like cattle, as I stated, with a little skeletal length, and both these steers have it. I think you'll agree the steer that wins the class is better coming out of the top of his spine. He's better in his barrel and his rib shape, and he carries back into his flank better, lower into his flank than the steer that he beats in this class. Outstanding calf, big-footed, nice bone, really, really good calf. Likewise, got a really good calf that comes in second. I don't think he balances up quite as well as the steer in first in terms of he's not quite as fresh in his crest down into his jawline. And then as you can view, he's a little harsher in his rib shape. He doesn't have that true shape to his barrel, or at least not yet in his career. I'd like to see him a little bolder in his rib shape. I'd like to see him a little softer in his flank to get him into that one hole in this class. And then again, he's got to balance up just a little. I don't think he's quite as fresh in the top of his crest and his top 1/3 third, is the number 1 steer in this class. This deep red steer that goes third in this class, I like this calf. He's good in his center body, good enough in his center body. Yes, he gets just a little flatter in his rib cage, and he gets just a little plainer in the lower part of his shoulder and up in his front 130. I'd like to extend his neck. I'd like to change the way his neck comes out of his shoulder. Actually, comes out just a little low, and I like that calf a great deal. If I could give him a little more boldness and a little more shape, and then in order to get him into the 2-hole, even though that steer has a little bit of the same issues, I don't think this steer has the true shape and design out in his hip as the 2 steer in this class.
And in class number 2, the Hereford Steers, Jessica Hobaugh is going to be third place, Bentley Lester second, and Ainsley McIndoe first place in class number 2. We'll look to class number 3 now. Landry Allen is a scratch, and we hope that Mason Shout has arrived. On the Hereford end, we are still looking for Lopez, Churchman, and Smith. Last call for all limousines. Last call for all limousines to the staging area, please.
A really high quality single entry in this Slim Flex class. One I really love, and from a body shape standpoint, big volume, wide pinned, heavy bone, fluid moving female that could dang sure stand some more competition.
We are looking for Riley Mack and Jace Jordan. Riley Mack, Jace Jordan to the steer makeup area, please. Riley Mack, Jace Jordan to the steer makeup area. We're about to let your class in.
Another single entry white flanked female that's impressive in terms of her foot and bone, big bodied female. I think though if we're really going to be hard on her, she needs to be leaned up quite a bit if you study her through her chest all the way back to her flank. A really nice trio of limb flex females here as we think through picking a champion. Numbers weren't as big, but I think if you look from the calf all the way to the oldest female, there's some quality pattern, females that got some look. Today, I think the one that puts it all together from a structural base in terms of balance and body shape, still lean and fresh enough. The female right in front of me out of the second hole will be your champion today.
In our champion, or excuse me, in our Hereford class over here, I heard the word champion, and we're not quite to that point yet. Got a really nice deep red Hereford to start this class, a bigger frame kind of cattle. Calf though that's really solid and really true coming out of the back of his shoulder. Nice extension up through his front 1/3. He's really good boned, he's nice footed. And with all that look, he's got some true shape and design out in his hip, carries down into his lower 1/3. Just a really nice steer to start this class with. The second place steer I think is an obvious second placer for me. I like his muscle shape and design. He's just a tick straighter in his hock than I think is optimum, and he's a little narrow on that back foot, so it causes him to be just a little tentative when he goes. It's not bad, I think it's acceptable, but I would like to change that. I think he has more true muscle shape and design out of the back of his shoulder, out through his loin, coming out of the top of his rib cage. I think his shape is better, and he's certainly got more true shape and dimension out in his hip, like the steer that wins this class, down into his hock. So just a really, really nice steer. Would I try and stand in here and convince you that he's perfectly comfortable at the ground when he goes? No, because he's not. He's a little narrow-footed, and with that, he wants to go around just a little. He's not quite as functional at the ground as what I think is perfect. This is a really nice steer here. He's a steer that I think is a little flatter in his overall design. I don't think there's as much true muscle shape and dimension under that hide as a steer that beats him in this class. Young lady does a pretty good job showing he's being a little bit of a stinker, isn't he? He didn't want to stand still, and so with that, he wants to get up in his top and down in his pins just ever so slightly. Makes you question his true power out in his hip. I wanted to like this steer a great deal. I love the way this steer is designed. He's got a part by his tail head that makes his tail head look worse and makes him look worse rump. With that being said, I considered going at least in the third place with this steer, but then I see him go in motion and he just gets tight in his spine and gets up on those ankles. I do like that steer a great deal when he's standing still. It's unfortunate the way that part is in his hair. Maybe something can be done about that, because I truly do think it accentuates a little higher tail head that probably isn't optimum on that steer. And then this steer that comes next, just a little plainer, just a real good, really honest, good feeding kind of cattle, good in the center design of his body, big enough in his hip, runs downhill just a little, gets a little plainer in his chest, runs into his chest floor, throws him out of balance just a little, but a really nice, really practical head of cattle.
A really nice single entry to get started in the main heifer show. This female is really attractive through her front 1/3. You know, she's one that gets out and is really flexible, holds her top line correctly, really square out of her pin. She gets a little nervous out here every once in a while, but a really good-bodied, good-looking female from the side.
As we go back to the Limousine Length Flex breed runoff, your reserve champion is going to be Kamaraja Jorgensen. Breed champion, it goes to Caitlin Skiles. We're looking for all main Anjou exhibitors, all main Anjou exhibitors to the heifer warm-up area, please. In class number 3 of the Hereford division, in the steer side, you're looking at 5th place went to Ryland Reno, 4th went to Levi Watley, 3rd to Pacey Fritch, 2nd went to Madeline Whipple, and 1st went to Mason Shout. All main Anjou and all main Angus exhibitors, please get to the warm-up area in the heifer division. If you're showing main Anjou or main Angus heifers, please make your way to the makeup pen.